Hi everyone, welcome to the show. With me, 𝓵𝓮𝓪𝓻. What? Do pronounce it for me.
𝓵𝓮𝓪𝓻. You had it. 𝓵𝓮𝓻, just like it's spelled. 𝓵𝓮𝓻. Brown, S-H-E-R. You got it.
Okay, right. So I thought that name would actually be relatively easy to say, but it's okay. Thanks, Dan, for being on the show. It's an absolute pleasure. And let me introduce a little bit about Dan. Dan is the president, CEO, and co-founder at 𝓬𝓬, which is based in Las Vegas, Nevada. Dan is a national thought leader in Amazon retail strategy and emerging e-commerce trends. He's a commentator on Amazon practices, policies, and technologies, as well as a sought-after opinion source from media quoted by Bloomberg, Forbes, MSN.com, LA Times, Reuters, and key specialist trade and business media outlets across the country. 𝓵𝓮𝓪𝓻 has spoken on panels at trade shows, conferences, and industry think tanks. At this moment in time, he's actually cocooned in his home office to protect himself from catching diseases from trade show people.
Right.
He advises everyone from multi-million-dollar corporations to fast-paced entrepreneurial startups on how to navigate the complex landscape of Amazon retail and the broader world of e-commerce in general. Dan, along with his two partners, is also co-founder of 𝓭𝓪, a top 200 global Amazon selling $1 billion in revenue, but he has now exited that business. He's also a member of TAN, the worldwide alliance of an incubator for independently owned marketing agencies, as well as a member of Vistage, the global organization for entrepreneurship and executive coaching. Dan tells clients the secret to helping everyone succeed with Amazon is a real well-experienced learned and perfected the hard way. As he says, I made the mistakes with Amazon so you don't have to. Dan, welcome to the show. It's an absolute blast to have you here, mate. Or as they say in the US, welcome here, buddy. So we say mate in Australia. So, because, I don't know if you know much about Australia, but the English sent the original Australians, who were not the original, there was original before the original, but we were sent as convicts. So, yeah. So
I didn't know that,
yeah,
Jeff.
yeah.
That's good to know. I appreciate that nugget. I watch a lot of Bluey with my kids, and it's a great Australian export right now.
Yeah, it is
for us with young kids.
Yeah, we're teaching Hollywood how to do animation now, really. So yeah,
you guys have nailed it. From convict to
yeah,
child cartoon curators. It's amazing.
Yeah, we're with two twin 6-year-olds. I'm sure that you've watched Bluey quite regularly, so good to know they've actually adopted a little bit of Australian. But the reality is that you started Trend Nation. Well, Australia's known as the crime nation, really. I'm joking.
I didn't know that either, Jeff. I'm learning a lot from you already. This is great.
No, we're not a crime nation. We're actually very safe here. In fact, compared to America, I think we're doing okay. So, at any rate, I digress, and I don't know how we got there, but let's go back to e-commerce.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I got involved with e-commerce about working for an agency building e-commerce stores a long time ago, actually back in 2009 to 2013. So I actually have some experience in e-commerce building stores, but you've taken it a whole new level. So let me ask the question.
Yeah.
What motivated you to actually start an e-commerce business? Like college, so was there an intrinsic, was it over a beer? What happened?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's see. I went to Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Okay, it's a big university here in the States, the Buckeyes. And let's see, always was involved in various things, activities, businesses, money-making, streams, entrepreneurship, etc. So I graduated from university and immediately got a job working in a space not at all related to e-commerce. I was selling spine implants to neuro and orthopedic surgeons, and I spent years of my life and hours of my days standing in the operating room watching spine surgeries.
Wow.
Neck surgery, spine surgery. So that was what I did. And so I never had a a major interest in e-commerce, or never thought to myself, hey, I want to be in the e-commerce business. But I was on a train in Munich, Germany in about 2007, 2008. And I was at a buddy's bachelor party in Europe. And at that moment in time was on a train. And my friend at the time, and really my just an entrepreneurial, I don't know, inspiration. He was my partner. His name is Brad. He had started a business with his then girlfriend, who became his wife, and they were sourcing jewelry on Alibaba and selling it on eBay. And so we were on this train and we were having a good time. And I said, hey, why don't we do the same type of business, but why don't we source, I don't know, cufflinks or money clips? Okay. So we said, sure, let's do that. Right. And it was a complete side hustle. And so we started doing that. We were, again, like the intent for me was it was a total side thing to learn how to sell stuff on the internet. Like that literally was it.
Did you go and do vast research on the market size and competitors of cufflinks?
No, zero research, Jeff. We were on eBay. What was cool though is we were on Alibaba, right? And like I was talking to factory owners in China. I never even thought about this or done this before. And lo and behold, we started buying products, and I don't know, there was minimal strategy other than what we thought. It was very subjective and perhaps some trademark infringement at the time, and sourcing things we thought people might like, and started receiving these boxes of cufflinks to my home and started selling these things on eBay. We spun up a bunch of micro websites, and in my off time, I would be packaging up orders in my basement and dropping them off at the USPS in Columbus, Ohio. And it was fun. It was interesting. It was, again, a side project. And so that was my first foray into e-commerce. And then my friend / partner moved to Las Vegas in around 2009-ish, started taking a more active role in the business and saying, hey, there's actually something here. Maybe this could be my full-time job. Started attending a bunch of trade shows in Las Vegas for categories, right? Could be the pet show, or the Magic was a big one for us, which is the fashion kind of soft leather goods show. And started going to these shows and talking to all these brands directly, and said, you know what? Why don't I start trying to sell like this brand name merchandise on these platforms? And so we started on eBay, spun up a bunch of micro websites, then started selling on Amazon, and started selling other brand name merchandise. So, Tommy Hilfiger, as an example, Kenneth Cole, Betsy Johnson. So these brands that are sold in department stores that people know about, we started selling those on Amazon in like 2010.
So the question I have on that is, do the brands have their own e-commerce stores at that stage or not?
This was like 2010.
Yes, that's what
it was like the wild, wild west on Amazon. Okay. So there was no advertising, right? Their ad business today is tens of billions of dollars, no ads, right? It was the early FBA days, and nobody knew how to sell. And nobody knew what they were doing. Brands certainly didn't know what they were doing. And we, quite frankly, didn't know how prolific it was going to be. So at that time, a lot of what was happening was the brands did not have a store, right? And or if they did, they were selling their products to Amazon at wholesale, and Amazon was their retailer. But it was really early. And I remember walking these trade shows, and I didn't officially rejoin the company until 2012, 2013, walking these trade shows, talking to these brands, and they didn't have any idea what was happening on Amazon with regards to their products in a lot of cases. So the answer is no, right? It was no. Products just ended up there. We were a reseller. And in a lot of cases, we would walk into these brands' trade show booths and have an iPad, and we'd pull up the iPad and we'd show them exactly what was happening on Amazon with their brands and their products and who was selling it and at what price point. And we had a pretty good idea of what was happening on Amazon at that point. We would use the iPad and the data we had and walk into the trade show booth and say, hey, listen, I want to buy this wallet, and this wallet. I don't care about the 50 other wallets you have. I only want those 3 wallets, and I'm going to write you a $10,000 PO right now, right? Because we saw it. We had the information. We knew what was selling. And that was pretty unique, right? These brands are well established. You're like, who are you? Like, I've never heard of 𝓲𝓽. I've never heard of any of your companies. And you all of a sudden showed up in my booth, immediately picked out the top 3 best-selling items and agreed to write me a $10,000 PO on the spot. Like, that's pretty crazy. And that's what happened. And in 2010, the early days, and our business absolutely exploded at that point as well.
Yeah.
So
it was the Wild West, wasn't it? Because Shopify didn't exist. Big commerce didn't exist. It was all build your own proprietary store, usually using something like, WordPress, wasn't it, with an e-commerce plugin?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there was minimal scale, there was minimal tools out there. And people just had to figure it out, and it was very clunky. So yeah, pre-Shopify, early Amazon, and things have changed quite a bit.
They have, and I spent 4 years in an e-commerce agency, actually building websites, and they're all custom built, and so it was the Wild West. Everyone was still trying to work it out. There was a lot of that's why I asked you the question about major brands. Did these even major brands have an e-commerce store? And the answer, it was almost a rhetorical question, because the answer I knew was going to be no.
Yeah, it was no, right? Which was an opportunity for us.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah. So 𝓲𝓽, obviously, you got in at the right time, didn't you? At the embryonic Wild West time of the evolution and revolution of e-commerce.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the journey. You're going there, you spoke to these brands, you start to sell it on Amazon on their behalf, or you were selling your own products, their products, buying it from them.
Yeah. Yeah. So we started as a private label company, right? We would buy cufflinks or purse hooks or whatever it was, and we'd slap our brand on it and logo and say, hey, we're going to sell you, customer, we're going to sell you this product. But we own the brand, right? We bought it directly from the factory. When we started becoming a reseller or distributor, we would buy products directly from the brands or from their official distributors at wholesale. We would store the goods in our warehouse. We would pick, pack, and ship the goods either direct to consumer for an order or into FBA, okay? Because we were a third-party seller. So 𝓲𝓽 was a third-party seller, had multiple third-party seller or seller central accounts at the time. And so we sold on Amazon. You have a storefront as a seller. So we would sell ourselves as the name of our storefront, but the brand would be Tommy Hilfiger. We're selling the brown Tommy Hilfiger wallet. Here's the product detail page. And we're one of a handful of sellers that are trading that item and competing, right?
Yep.
And what happened is, in the early days, that was an amazing business, right? We were one of the early entrants into that market, and we might be the only seller of the brown Tommy Hilfiger wallet. Okay.
Right.
And our business exploded, right? It doubled every single year for like 3 to 4 years straight. And what happened was what Amazon created was this ecosystem that removed barriers to entry and allowed for entrepreneurs to create businesses. And we were one of those businesses, right? And the business model we chose was to become a distributor and or reseller. Well, guess what? Right? Other people caught on to that and started doing something very similar. So after 2-3 years, what we found ourselves doing in 2012, 2013 is we hired a bunch of people. We had a big buying team, and we had categories, and we'd go to, the pet show, or we'd go to the sports show, the outdoor show, or the fashion show. And we had buyers, and they were buying product for Amazon. And what we found ultimately, what we became or what we were doing was trading commodities, because the way Amazon works is everybody then started to compete on price.
Yeah.
Okay, so we said, how do we build a business like this? If we buy into a SKU that we really like based on our data, but the SKU only lasts for 30 days because 15 other people then get the same SKU and everybody's competing on price. It doesn't work. Margin falls out. There's zero control. Everybody is literally trading commodities. So we
Yes.
said, okay, this was great and it worked, but there's no moat around this business. How do we protect, right? If we want to build an e-com business via Amazon as the primary platform, well, how do we do that? And so one of the pivots we made was we said, all right, the key element to Amazon is control, right? And controlling distribution and controlling the product or the UPC or the ASIN, because you want to make sure you win the business if the customer comes through to buy that product. So we said, we know all these brands. We've got this whole infrastructure. We have the ability to cut big POs and work with big brands. Why don't we build out an exclusive distribution model? So then we would go to Tommy Hilfiger and say, hey, Tommy, let us be your exclusive seller of your assortment or these products on Amazon. Okay. And in exchange for that exclusivity, we're going to hold your price, right? So we're not going to violate any sort of pricing policies. We want to keep a clean marketplace. We'll hold price. We will build out your Amazon storefront. We'll build out all your product pages on Amazon. We'll manage your advertising on Amazon. Let's try and create a cohesive strategy for you guys to win on Amazon. Okay. But you can't sell to anybody else, right? So we're going to buy your inventory and we're going to sell. We're going to be your seller of record. Can't sell to anybody else. And so we pivoted to that. And we did that for a few years. We simultaneously started doing a lot more private label as well. Back to this element of control. Well, how do we build a long-term business on Amazon? Well, what if we own the brand? What if we got the product directly from the manufacturer and built it out that way? So we simultaneously did that. Okay. And I think what we realized over time was that given the complexity in working with brands and their ability to control their distribution, okay, meaning even if we signed an exclusivity deal with a brand and they tried to abide by it, they had a whole sales network, they had distributors everywhere, they could never keep a clean channel. And so what ultimately happened is we said, we agreed to do all of these things for you. We're doing them. You also agreed to give us exclusivity, but it's hard for you to control your exclusivity. So we're actually not winning any business. So all these other people that have your products are actually selling more than we are because we agreed to hold price. And so we said, all right, we're on to something here with providing more value and more additional services to brands, but the model's incorrect, right? We're buying inventory. So are we the customer or are they the customer because they give us exclusivity? We said, all right, hold up. Moving forward, if we're going to work with any other brands on Amazon, the best way to do that is via an agency model or a service-based model where we don't have to buy their inventory, touch their inventory, store their inventory, ship their inventory. We can teach them how to do all of that. It's better for them because they have more control. They make more margin. And it's a platform that they can leverage with Channel Key or with anybody else. So Trend Nation pivoted 100% to private label. And then any brands we worked with over time, we betaed this agency concept and officially rolled Channel Key out in January of 2017. So we basically bifurcated the businesses, two separate companies. The product company was Trend Nation, was all private label. And then Channel Key developed the service-based model and worked with all the brands. And fast forward to today, that's what I've been doing that since day one. I've got 85 people on my team. We're a fully remote shop. We work with some of the biggest brands all over the world, and that was the genesis,
Right.
of where I'm at today.
Okay, cool. So Trend Nation sold. So that was your typical business. You make margin on your product when you sell it, for example. Okay, so
Correct.
So the agency model, is that fee for service, depending on the level of service? Is that the business model for?
Yeah. There's a couple different models, but in essence, we're a full service channel management agency. Okay, at our core. So on average, 8 or 9 people on my team will touch our client accounts each month, right? That have a specific job or a function. It could be somebody on our leadership team that's building out a strategic business plan for a brand. It could be a graphic designer building out graphics for a storefront or for A+ content. Could be an analyst doing forecasting. It could be a digital marketer that's running search ads for our clients on the Amazon platform. Could be our head of DSP that's running programmatic for our clients on our DSP seat on Amazon. Okay. And so we've got varying degrees of service, but in essence, our job is to sell product and or deploy media. And so we work on a kind of a retainer revenue share model.
Right. So you do take a cut of sales as part of what you do because you say we know
Generally.
we're so confident what we do that we know that we can take a percentage
That's right.
as well as the retainer. Okay, cool. So in terms of competitors for you, is because you're doing this for big companies, but you obviously have very deep and broad knowledge in terms of how to operate on Amazon, because what started as the Wild West has become a very algorithmic driven business model, isn't it now?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So in sense, you're almost in a race to keep ahead of a brand actually having expertise, but you have more expertise. So they come to you continually to, I suppose, be optimal on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's like a classic make or buy service-based business model, right? So brands need to figure out who they want to be and what they want to be good at. And
Yep.
some of them want to be really good at Shopify and they want it to leave Amazon to somebody else, right? Some of them want to be really good at Amazon and want to build that strength in-house. Some of them are too big and say, hey, listen, we're good at building product and branding. We don't want to be Amazon experts, right?
Yep.
And so that's where we come in. So sometimes brands want to take it in-house and manage it in-house, and sometimes they don't, right? It's like I don't know, it could be an attorney for a business. Do you want to have in-house counsel, or do you want to
Yes.
do you want to send it out to an outside party? I think it's the same concept.
Yep. So what have been some of the biggest challenges for you? One thing that crossed my mind as you were talking about the growth was doubling every year. Growth is great, but you've got to fund the growth. You've got to hold stock. How did you manage that growth in terms of, basically funding it?
Yeah. So on the product on the Trend Nation side,
Yes.
that was a big issue, right? Is we had to fund growth via inventory acquisition. And I
Right.
think that's one thing that people don't always think about or talk about, right?
No, they
You
don't.
hear there's a lot of, I don't know, you go on YouTube and find out about how to grow a, FBA business on Amazon for like serial entrepreneurs. And you can do that, and that exists. But I think one thing that's always lost is that, hey, listen, just because you made $100,000 in sales doesn't necessarily mean you have $100,000,
Exactly.
right? You've got to figure out how to build a sustainable model. So for us, we had a line of credit, right? We had a good track record and a history on selling, and we had a good relationship with our bank. And we had a line of credit that was personally guaranteed by the owners of the business. And
Personally guaranteed. Now that's a risk.
that's a risk, right? And it was such a Q4 heavy business, seasonally based business. It was really like September, October, you're coming into the end of the year. You've got all your capital deployed. You're waiting on goods inventory, and you're waiting for a 60-day period to sell through all your inventory to pay off your line of credit so you then pay yourself. It was really stressful,
Yeah.
right? It's very stressful. So for that business to grow, yes, you need access to capital 100% to fund your inventory.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've had that experience before. I was a good salesperson, and I learned very quickly when I started a business that despite growing a company from 0 to 2 million turnover in 2 years, that came with the funding of the stock. And that led to a lot of pain. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah. Yeah. And to scale an agency or a service-based business is different,
Yes.
right? You don't necessarily have those capital requirements, but you've got different issues to contend with and different issues to deal with by adding people or technology, or to your earlier question, you got to stay ahead. Well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So the capital model and the funding model is very different between a product-based business and a service-based business, especially one that doesn't, I don't have trucks. I don't have I don't have a manufacturing facility. I don't even have capital. It's literally people and contracts and technology. So it's just a different scale model.
Yeah. So, what were some of the other challenges? Because quite often the other challenge for entrepreneurs is finding the right people to actually
Yeah,
um, to leverage yourself, because basically you've only got certain amount of time in the week and every day. So, was recruiting the right people a challenge for you?
100%. And I think, especially at Channel Key in the agency, and I think this is probably true for any business type. We're in the people business, 100%, right? And so, it's incumbent upon leaders to bring on the right people. But sometimes that's really hard. And so I think one of the key learnings that I had in the earlier days was that we lacked an operating model. Okay. And so we found something called traction, or EOS, that we implemented that helped me understand the ideal structure needed to run my company.
Mhm.
And B, subsequently helped me understand the types of people I needed to bring on.
Mhm.
Right. So in the early days, you kind of do everything. You're an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to do everything.
Yes.
But at some point, if you continue to grow and scale, there are problems that will get created. And I think the problems that I saw was where people, and specifically me in a lot of cases, became the bottleneck.
Yes.
And understanding that when that happens, and understanding how to get through that.
Yep.
And one of the ways you get through that is understanding what seats should be on the bus. Okay. And then what seats are the current people sitting in, and is it right or is it wrong?
Mm.
So,
Yeah. So, with all these challenges, basically trying to make sure you've got enough capital to keep the business going as you're growing, and
yeah.
also finding the right people. Did you have anyone that was like a coach or a mentor, or was it books you read, trade shows? Did you just learn it from the doing as you went along? Who was there anyone that helped you, or was there a team of people behind you that helped you?
Yeah, I think for me, so I was lucky to have partners, right, that were all active in the business. So, that was always helpful. But I think as we grew and expanded, again, we spun out Channel Key as a separate company. Um, I've been a part of various networks over the years, and I've been fortunate to have mentors. And so for me, and he mentioned this at the beginning, I'm a member of Vistage, right? So I've been a member of Vistage for 11 plus years, which is an executive CEO group. It's national and international organization. And I've had a mentor and various mentors in that group over the last 11 years, business owners, not necessarily related to the business type that I'm in, but business owners that are dealing with the same types of issues that I'm dealing with.
Mm.
And so I've had access to that. I was in TAN, which you mentioned. I'm in YPO now. So I've got these networks that I've been a part of that are made up of business owners, and some of them are related to the business type that I'm in, and others are not. And my other partners have had access to those types of networks as well. So I think it's just the combination of hiring talent, bringing in people that are better at certain job functions than we are, establishing networks with people in our space or other groups or orgs that are outside of our space, and continuously being curious about understanding and learning about things that we don't know. And so I have a mentor. His name's Clyde Horner. He's been with me forever, and his fingerprints are all over my company from a leadership, from a development perspective. He's not necessarily the tactical guy. I don't bring my tactical issues to him. He's a coach and helps with leadership and development and mindset and these sorts of things.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. So, did you have any challenges delegating, or are you a control freak, or you were able to delegate easily?
I've had challenges with it. I think most entrepreneurs, when they start, they have to be control freaks, right? Because you need to know what's happening and you have to do everything. I think I've gotten better at delegating over time through practice and learning. And I still struggle with it at times because there's I think an art to letting things go and being okay with the result that you get. And for me, it's kind of rooted in this idea of building other leaders and empowerment. But also I've gotten feedback about this. I think in 2000 and for my staff. So in 2019, I think it was, my leadership team fired me. They literally fired me, right? I was in 4 seats on the bus and they're like, dude, you have to get out of 3 of those seats or else this is not going to work.
Yes.
Right. So I think creating space and building leadership teams and allowing the safety for your key people to give you feedback has certainly helped me. And in that moment, it helped me. Right. I mean, they very candidly, this was in front of my mentor, fired me. They said, you can't do this anymore. And I needed to hear that. As hard as it was for me, or as much as it stung my ego, right? Hearing that from my team was an unlock for me and a learning experience for me.
So what seats did you give up?
Well, I was this, so we use EOS or traction. Okay. So I think the seats I was in at the time were, I was the visionary. So the CEO, I'm in charge of culture, I'm in charge of vision, and I manage and own, in a lot of cases, the larger relationships that support the business. I was also the integrator or the operator of the business, right? The COO or whatever title you want to use. So I had all the department heads rolling into me and a lot of direct reports. So I was operating the day-to-day of the business. Okay. I was the head of sales, right? I was in charge of bringing deals in. And so I had to get out of the big one was the integrator role because I'm not a great integrator. I'm not a great process guy. I'm not a great finance guy, right? I can go sell and I can build relationships and I can help with culture and figure out the vision. That's what I'm good at, but I'm not the operator. So the big one I got fired from was the operator role, the integrator role. And we brought somebody in to do that. And it was a complete unlock for the business.
Yeah. Because it's people that actually do enjoy the process. I'm not one of those guys either. And also, I'm not good at doing the detailed accounting and bookkeeping. I hate that. So
yeah.
And for me, I'm a bit bigger picture, and handing that over to someone else, actually, it wasn't hard because I'm going, I hate this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't hard to let go of that. I suppose the challenge was paying for it, going, oh, now I've got to pay someone to do this, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't necessarily think I have a challenge delegating, like from an ego or control perspective. Sometimes it's just realizing when things need to be delegated.
Yes. Yeah, that's hard.
So
okay, so you're growing rapidly, with the company, Trend Nation, and when was the moment you said, look, we really need to sell this, we need to pivot, or did someone turn up with a bucket of money and going, we want to buy the business off you? What happened?
Yeah. So there's a time period here. So starting in 2017, I was not active in the day-to-day at Trend Nation. My 2 partners ran that business, right? So they ran that business and I ran the service business. I ran Channel Key, right? So from 2017 to 2021, that period, I was not active. I was an owner, an investor, right? And so I think what we saw was that we had been running that business for a long time, 10 plus years. I brought up this idea to you of funding inventory and the amount of risk that all the partners had we had to leverage our families to pay for inventory.
And
right?
Personal guarantee is a big thing because that's why you have companies, because you don't do personal guarantees generally.
Yeah, but we didn't have a choice.
Yes.
Right. And so that was required. And a lot of us grew up, we had young families, we've got kids in schools, and it's like, man, we're taking on this risk every single year.
Wow.
And so I think it reached a point where we said, you know what, we've been doing this for a long time. We built a really nice business. We had just gotten through COVID. And the business was doing really well. And there was a lot of in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of interest in buying kind of Amazon-based brands.
It
And
was.
there,
There was a lot of big venture capital companies were actually
yeah,
created to actually
yeah,
acquire and build a group, didn't they?
that's right. Yeah. So they were called aggregators. And there was a bunch of them, and there was a lot of money that flew into the market. And the idea was they were going to aggregate disparate brands, Amazon native brands, and build the next Procter and Gamble. Right. And so we were kind of caught up in that. And fortunately, it was a good time for us. And somebody came through, and we just felt it was the right thing to do at that moment in time.
Mm. How are the aggregators doing today?
Well, the big one, it's interesting. So the big one, 𝓬𝓪, just declared for bankruptcy.
Mhm.
And there others have struggled as well, but others actually seem to be doing okay. And so I think the ones that chose a lane and or a
Yes,
category
a
that they
niche.
want to participate in are the ones that are doing well.
Yeah,
Um, because it's hard. I mean, if you think about it, how do you aggregate 300 brands that are unrelated to each other
I know.
and find any sort of economies of scale? They've got different manufacturers, they've got different warehouses, the category dynamic is different, the competitors are all different. Like, I think that to financially engineer a business like that, on paper, you can maybe wrap your head around it, but in reality and practicality, it's really hard.
Right.
And I think it became really hard to run that business type because the costs for logistics, for sourcing, for everything increased so rapidly post COVID. So A, you just bought all these assets, and B, the cost to run that business has dramatically skyrocketed. So your margins go down. Meanwhile, you have to service your debt, right? For all these brands you bought. And I think it was just I think it was an overextend, right? I think valuations maybe got a little too high. There was a little too much fervor in the market. And some of the aggregators will ultimately do well, but some of them are going to fail. And there's going to be consolidation, which is already happening.
Mm.
So that was our exit point.
So did you go looking for a buyer, or did you go to an agent, business agent, or did you get approached? How did
Yeah,
it?
we hired a banker. We hired a banker and took and ran a process and took it to market.
Right.
So
Okay. For me, it sounds like your timing might have been quite spot on, impeccable, even in terms of selling at the peak of the market.
I think certainly hindsight is 2020, and I think it was a good move for us. It was the right time for sure.
Because you sold post-COVID after the whole COVID thing made e-commerce grow even more rapidly.
Yeah, there was a time when people thought like e-commerce advanced 10 years in adoption
Yes, it
over
did.
the course of 12 months. And I think it's reverted back to the norm, right? It's back on the original kind of growth
Trend.
trajectory it was, but nobody knew, right? Nobody knew at the time. I mean, Amazon was like the Red Cross for a time, like that was the only way or one of the few ways where you could actually get goods.
Yes.
So nobody knew.
No.
But yeah, I think the timing for us was good. It worked out well.
Yeah. Yeah. So timing quite often is everything, either entering or selling, and everything in between. So, all right. So there's another thing that's happening in the middle of what you're doing. When I don't know how it impacts you in e-commerce, but I'm intrigued by AI. Is AI impacting what you do? Like you're collecting a lot of data, obviously, about markets, doing research. Uh,
Yeah.
What's great about humans are normally pattern recognition machines, but there's actually now a tool to help them human be even better at that, and it's called AI. So, and the foundations of AI are essentially the software, the large language models, and the apps build on those large language models. Then you've got the hardware that drives it, NVIDIA and so on, the processors and the data centers. And the third part is the actual oil, which is the data. The data is the new oil for e-commerce,
Yeah.
to make sense of it. So how do you see, and what are you experiencing, the impact of AI, and where do you think it's going to take e-commerce and your industry?
It's a really good question. So let's see. So functionally, running a service business or running an agency like we do, there's a lot of ways that we can leverage AI to create more scale and more efficiency.
Yes.
Right. And so we're doing that with content, with copywriting, right? We're doing it with graphic design in a lot of cases, and finding these opportunities to scale, right? And you can even use it as for your sales team. Look, that's going after new business, right? You can have AI do a sentiment analysis on the call that it just listened to, right? So there's a lot of functionality. I still think it's really early.
Yes. It's
And
Wild West time still, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's really early, right? And so most of the AI usage for us is in the form of tools, right? We use a lot of software tools, right? Some of the best tools that exist on the market, and they're rolling out for example, ad spend, right? We place a lot of media for our clients on Amazon, and some of the tools we use is leverage AI to help with bid adjustments on Amazon, right? So that's a lot of our exposure. We see it on Amazon. Like Amazon's aggregating reviews, customer reviews, and trying to summarize those reviews using AI. So that stuff is really interesting and cool, and there'll be more of that sort of thing. I think one of the interesting parts about AI that's going to happen is it's going to change search and how people search and or browse and or find products. Okay, so like I believe at some point every single person is going to have their own AI assistant that's going to be able to accept all the data and all the signals, right, from what I search to what I listen to what I watch to everything, and will be able to curate products for me that most likely will align with my interests. So I think it's going to change search, right? So today Amazon's a giant search engine. You pop the name of the thing you're looking for, you type it in, and then it indexes and it services products or ideas or brands that I might be interested in. And I think in the future that's going to evolve into some sort of AI browsing assistant.
Yes.
Okay, that's going to help us. And then I think the last part of this to me, and sorry for being long-winded, but you brought up this concept of data as the oil. And what I see happening right now with Amazon in particular is that, yes, so Amazon's built this massive flywheel where they've got so much commerce happening on their platform. They've got AWS going. They've got this massive advertising business they've built, and they've got this big, massive content business that they've either acquired and or built. They own MGM, right? They have their own streaming TV service at this point. And really, I believe what they're doing, especially with regards to their ads business, is they are leveraging some of the best shopping data that exists on the planet. And they are now monetizing that data through their advertising business. And it's really interesting and powerful, especially what they're doing with DSP and audience building, to where companies that don't even sell a physical product anymore, or don't, like it could be an insurance provider that sells insurance for pets or whatever. You can leverage Amazon's customer and audience data now programmatically to target consumers that might be interested in using your service.
Yes.
So that's new. That's a newer thing. You don't have to sell a physical product.
So explain the acronym to the audience, what DSP means.
It's a demand side platform.
Right.
So it's programmatic media buying through Amazon's DSP. They have their own DSP. Other entities have their own DSPs as well.
Right. Yeah, the flywheel they've built is enormous. I read some data the other day that 40% of all e-commerce business in the United States is done through Amazon.
Yeah.
And
it's huge.
It's huge.
And I think it's like 90% of all marketplace e-commerce business in the United States is through Amazon.
Yeah, it's just staggering. It's and yeah, they're coming up against some of the antitrust sort of programs that are trying to be brought in, so they can't use their market power. And, the big platforms are like techno states in their own right. They have, revenues and equity that actually exceed, the GDP of many small nations.
Yeah.
And I would be interested in what you think about this. It's a bit off topic. Maybe it's rabbit hole, don't need to go down. But in Australia, Facebook and Google were actually brought to the negotiating table to actually pay for the content that they were actually scraping, essentially, or sharing off media companies. And part of the deal was they needed to contribute $250 million to the media companies. And what I mean by that is major media companies. So the media companies like News and so on in Australia, got given were told, Facebook and Google were told to actually, by the government, to actually pay for the content and Facebook's just said, given the middle finger to the government, going, we're not going to pay the media companies. So because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is where we've got to be really careful looking after, we can't just keep looking after the rich. We've got to look after the rest of people as well, as part of a proper democratic society, hopefully, and also any society. But do you see you're very close to Amazon, work with them, in them, around them?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Amazon's market power, and what are some of the downsides and upsides for you?
Yeah. Obviously, we're very closely involved with that platform, right? And I own the stock, right? I've owned it for a long time. And I think that there's already attempts to crack down, right? I think the biggest threat to Amazon right now perhaps is themselves or its government intervention, right? You see it a lot in the UK, and I think even in the States right now, there's antitrust things happening. So I can't speak like politically as to what that means or what should happen, but Amazon's really big and massive, and they control a lot, and they, as they get bigger, they'll have to adopt and or adjust perhaps certain parts of their businesses that the government deems, I don't know, monopolistic or whatever, right? But they have built this whole flywheel and this ecosystem that's really powerful, and the consumer has choice, and they're choosing it. And so you can't deny that, right? And brands want to be there, and they want to sell, and they're using their infrastructure, and they're using their advertising, and they're using all of these things. But, I think Amazon will just have to continually be careful about how they're wielding their power, right? And whether or not they're forcing brands to do something a certain way. They have to be careful about it. And then the laws are different in different countries, right? And the UK is very big on antitrust and pricing policies and those sorts of things. And, they're pressing on those issues. So I don't think it's anything new for Amazon. But as their business continues to expand, there's more scrutiny, more eyes, more everything politically that I'm sure they're fully aware of, and they're smart, and they've got all their people working on it. But I think at the end of the day, you just can't deny the power of the platform and the adoption of the platform, and that it's such a good environment for consumption to happen, and the consumer is speaking with their wallet.
Yeah, absolutely, because they've removed friction. Basically, they even patented the one-click buy method, didn't they?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, just to wrap it up here, like, what are some of the things you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with people that maybe want to sell on Amazon, and what would you say to those who want to maybe start an Amazon FBA store, fulfillment by Amazon, or just use Amazon to sell their products, source them? What would be maybe your top 2 or 3 tips from your experience?
Yeah, a couple tips. I think that if you're wanting to build a product business or an FBA business from scratch, there are a ton of tools that exist that are very cheap and in some cases free, that will allow you to evaluate different products or product categories or competitors and understand the volume that's happening, and understand the margin, the actual money that you'll be making. I think that's critical. Because in a lot of cases, it can be hard to make money on Amazon, right? There's certain price points that that if you get close to or below, it's really hard to make money. So if you're going to get into an FBA business, do your research, do product research, and trying to figure out a product category that you know can make money for the long haul and long term, right? Before you jump into anything, before you buy anything, do a ton of research. And to your earlier point or our discussion, understand how to manage your cash flow, right? Because guess what? You can sell the item. Amazon might pay you in 30 days, right? You might not get everything. There might be a holdback. You got to spend money on advertising. And you have to be able to understand how to keep your product in stock, because the moment you stock out is the moment all of the work and momentum you've built goes by the wayside. And you have to start back from scratch. So that's one element. And I think for more established brands, I don't know, it's getting more and more complex. There's a concept of retail readiness on Amazon. I think that's critical, that Amazon has defined as kind of the table stakes or the base minimum requirements to run a proper business on Amazon. Leverage your product detail page, all the thumbnail options, video, A+ content, storefront, quantity of reviews, quality of reviews, a prime offering. If you Google retail readiness, you can find it. That's a basic table stakes concept that still a lot of big brands fail to achieve. And hire an agency that knows all this stuff for you and can manage it for you.
Well, I think I know one of those agencies. I think they're called, remind me, Channel Key.
That's
I
right.
think that might be the one. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right.
That's one.
Dan, I've got one final question for you.
Sure.
And I set it up at the beginning. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do for free every day or every week that brings you joy and happiness? And I'm not talking getting drunk at the pub with your mates, but you can't with your 6-year-old twins anymore. You'd be in trouble straight away. So what brings you deep joy that you would, if you had all the money in the world, would do every day and not get paid for it?
Yeah, I think when I'm in the right place, from a work perspective, and what feels the best to me, that what brings me the most amount of joy, is seeing my team grow, right? So them feeling empowered and them working through issues that they have, right? And whether that's with their mindset or their emotions or how they speak to a customer or how they manage and prioritize or how they delegate, what gives me the most amount of joy is seeing those breakthroughs happen. And I'm very fortunate. I get a lot of coaching. I've got mentors. I've got a lot of people around me that are very successful that I can lean on, that help me. And when I'm able to share my learnings or share my experiences and tips and tricks and quips and sayings and see those breakthroughs happen, that's what gives me the most amount of excitement, right? Is building connections with people and relationships and being helpful, and hopefully removing barriers for them so they can continue to grow and develop.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And you've just summed up an 87-year-old Harvard study that showed the biggest thing that brings us joy is actually community and people. And you love helping your community and your team and your people. And that also leans into family, doesn't it, as well?
It does. Yeah. Relationships, people, community. I've never read that study, but I'd buy it. It makes sense to me. Yeah. It's less about dollars and cents, right? It's less about dollars and cents, and it's just about time and relationships.
Yep. Things don't make you happy.
They don't. They never do. It's a trap. 100% a trap.
And it's people that bring you deep joy, whether it's sitting around a dinner table, sharing ideas or jokes, or helping people. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And you've just actually, summed up an 87-year-old Harvard study. There you go.
I'm glad I could be helpful, Jeff. Thank you. A study I never read, but yes,
Okay.
thank you.
You can Google that. So Dan, thank you very much, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy. This brings me joy, is this having a chat with people all around the world, people who've got a lot of experience, they're smart, they've got the bruises and bumps along the way, and they're willing to share it with the world. Thank you very much for sharing your journey, and I look forward to hearing more about Channel Key and its ongoing success. Thank you.
Have me, Jeff. Appreciate it. That was fun.